Hey guys, it's Leah Buckles from Procedural Wide Medical Consulting. I am a U.S. Army Physician Assistant veteran and former CMP examiner. So today I was going to come on and discuss Agent Orange presumptive conditions. There's a lot of information out there, whether it's on va.gov, some of the more popular VA accredited law firms have a lot of great blogs about this topic. And there's just tons of Vietnam veterans out there that are either service connected for disorders related to Agent Orange exposure or are seeking service connection for these, or maybe you just don't even know about, the specifics surrounding Agent Orange, presumptive conditions, exposure, and, locations, times, stuff like that. So I wanted to just give a brief rundown of some of those facts that surround this and some good resources you can use to get more information and find out so that you can apply for these benefits if you haven't already. And, either on your own, if you're pretty savvy with it, or with your veterans, your local county veteran service officer, or, whoever is representing you, accredited agent, attorney, or whatever in the process. So, okay, so Agent Orange was an herbicide that was used during Vietnam, and there are several medical conditions that have been known to be tied to exposure to this, right? So some of them are cancerous, some of them are non-cancerous, and the Department of Veterans Affairs has a list of these conditions that they have already decided are what's considered presumptive. So I keep saying this word presumptive. What does that mean? So it means that veterans that meet certain eligibility criteria based on the disorder that they have and the location perhaps that they served, it should essentially be automatic that they are service connected for this issue. Now, not everything is like 100% black and white. There's always stuff that can pop up, but generally speaking, if you served in location X and you have condition Y, presumption, if the VA has decided that this is a presumed disability, they're going to grant service connection for that, right? Do you need a nexus letter? No. Do you ever need a nexus letter? And I say this all the time, right? I write nexus letters or medical opinion letters. No, they're never required, right? They can be helpful in your pursuit of VA disability at times, right? But when we're talking about presumptive conditions that the law, the VA policy and federal law has already put out that this is, hey, if you have this, then we're going to service connect you for this. It's pretty black and white, and you should be able to just say, hey, here's my medical records that support this. Here's my DD-214 that shows I was serving in this location, and it should be fairly easy, right? So let's talk about what the presumptive locations and things like that, are, right? So if you go over to va.gov and you search, Agent Orange exposure on va.gov, it really breaks it out really well. And so basically they say, I've got it up here, so I'm going to read some of it off so I don't mess it up. So you have to meet one of these service requirements listed on the website. So between January 9th, 1962 and May 7th, 1975, you must have served for any length of time in at least one of these locations, right? So either in the Republic of Vietnam, aboard a U.S. military vessel that operated in the inland waterways of Vietnam, on a vessel operating not more than 12 nautical miles seaward from the demarcation line of the waters of Vietnam or Cambodia, or on a regular perimeter duty on the fenced-in perimeters of a U.S. Army installation in Thailand or Royal Thai Air Force Base. These bases include, I'm not even going to pronounce them. There's a bunch of them on here because I'm going to butcher them, and then y'all are going to be hating on me, right? But there's a bunch, and that's kind of like the perimeter duty. That's kind of a sticky one that I see a lot, proving perimeter duty. And in a lot of those cases, it really kind of comes down to, do you have buddy letters? Maybe you were not on perimeter duty, but you spent a lot of time there, so those can be kind of the sticky ones in those Thailand cases. But moving on, or some of the other things are that you served near the Korean DMZ for any length of time between September 67 and August 31st, 1971. Or you served on active duty in the regular Air Force unit location where C-123 aircraft with traces of Agent Orange was assigned, right? and had repeated contact. So if you were on flight duty, medical duty, whatever, and you were touching those aircraft all the time, and that's where the Agent Orange was, that can be considered presumptive. If you were a reservist on a flight line, ground, or medical crew duties at one of the following locations, so Lockbourne or Rickenbacker Air Force Base in Ohio, and there's some dates, it's like 69 to 86, Westover Air Force Base, or Pittsburgh International Airport, assigned to the 758th Airlift Squadron. So there's a whole bunch of them on there. There's information for the Blue Water Navy Vietnam vets that was a big deal in 2019. So basically, I just want you guys to not memorize all that stuff, but know that there is a resource on va.gov that can kind of go over some of those locations with you and the timelines, right? So, you know, basically we talked about locations. Let's talk about some of the conditions, right? So some of the conditions, there were 3 that were just added recently. So we'll go over those 2. So amyloidosis, chronic B-cell leukemias, chloracne, diabetes, that's a big one. So type 2 diabetes, that's probably the most popular one that I see because it's a very common condition. So if you served in one of those locations that I previously discussed, and then you have type 2 diabetes, this is going to be a presumptive condition. And then don't forget all of the conditions that are residuals or secondary, you know, if you have peripheral, diabetic peripheral neuropathy, retinopathy, diabetic skin changes, things like that. And I have a good story about that in a second, but, Hodgkin's disease, ischemic heart disease, multiple myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Parkinson's disease, early onset peripheral neuropathy. Now, this is different than diabetic peripheral neuropathy, okay? If you had early onset, and this is another one where I kind of get sticky sometimes. So if somebody develops peripheral neuropathy 25 years later, that's not really what they're talking about. They're talking about somebody within a year or so of their exposure developing peripheral neuropathy, okay? So if veteran Snuffy developed it 25 years later, it may not meet that criteria. Now, if veteran Snuffy was diagnosed 10 years later or whatever, but had the symptoms ever since, and his personal history is like, hey, I've had these symptoms since then, that's still kind of a go, right? Because if you had the symptoms, but you just weren't diagnosed, didn't see the doctor or whatever, you didn't have insurance, that's a different story. But if the symptoms didn't start up until, you know, decades later, that can be tough, right? Unless it's that diabetic one and it's tied to diabetes, okay? Prostate cancer, respiratory cancers, soft tissue sarcomas, there are exceptions to that, and that's osteosarcoma, chondrosarcoma, and Kaposi's, I probably butchered that too, sarcoma and mesothelioma. The 3 new ones that got added in 2021 are going to be bladder cancer, hypothyroidism, and Parkinsonism. So, and I believe you want to check with your VSO or accredited agent. I believe those last 3, if you had previously applied for these and were denied, I think that those are being retroactively paid if you applied for them. But again, I'm not an accredited agent or attorney, so you may want to follow up with that with somebody who can help you look into that, right? I know there's been a lot of talk about hypertension getting added. I hope it does. I don't know what the scoop is on that. So that's that. Oh, so the story I wanted to tell you guys was like one of my favorite people in my VFW troop. I will not name his name. He, unfortunately, for many years, kept getting denied for diabetes. Kept getting denied. And the problem was that his DD-214 had an addendum page that had his Vietnam service on it. And so every time he kept going, he kept getting denied because they didn't have that addendum page, and they just kept denying him, saying he wasn't boots on ground in Vietnam, blah, blah, blah. And so eventually I took a look at this with him, and it really wasn't a me thing because, you know, it was, you know, really just, this was back when I was a CMP examiner. So the VA wanted an opinion anyways, but it was really just corrected based off of the DD-214 being figured out. But then he had all these other conditions, right? So he had diabetes, but he also had like diabetic skin changes, peripheral neuropathy, retinopathy, all these diabetic complications. And erectile dysfunction, all this kind of stuff. And so we were able to, you know, he was 10% tinnitus at the time, right? And so after we finished the CMP exam and added all those secondary conditions that were related to the diabetes, he wound up getting 100% VA disability, and it was backdated, like, I don't really even know, I think it was like 3 or 4 years that it had been pending in this process. And he was just like in tears, and he's one of my favorite stories I'll never forget. And he was just like, I'll never have to worry about anything again. And again, I didn't really do anything on that. I was so happy to be a part of it. But just the system getting corrected, and my kind of feedback to you guys on that is just to never give up, right? I know it can be so difficult, and so many veterans get just beat down by the system and not understanding it. But just make sure you're with your advocate, and you just keep pushing. If you believe that there is a legitimate service connection and something's getting looked over, or they're not reviewing the evidence correctly, they're human. People are human. We make mistakes, right? Just don't give up. Make sure you use your resources. VA.gov has this great information. There's also a search for accredited agents there where you can find someone in your local area by like zip code. You can put it in, I think, and find some good advocates in your area. I hope this was helpful on Agent Orange presumptive conditions. Let me know if there's anything else that you guys want to hear about. And I hope you enjoyed the content, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.